AP opportunities, the dual credit opportunities, and the industry certifications. You can see that we are trending up, and we do anticipate doing that again as we move forward in the future. When we look at all three of these indicators together, we successfully attained a 54% increase in this school year. To summarize, what we have shared with you tonight really creates the foundation for us to build upon as we look at the next 5-year plan for our college career and military readiness. Our Fort Bend ISD student groups outperform their peers in Texas and the U.S. We have significant, exciting growth in AP, dual credit, and industry certifications, as well as coherent sequences of CTE courses. The strategies that you see listed above, including that of new programming such as early college high school, P-TECH, and the opening of the Reese Center, as well as others, really provide many opportunities for our students and our district to see increases. We have other strategies such as improved systems for individual student planning. We have continued expansion of our AVID program over the course of the next few years. We continue to expand our AP course offerings, and we provide things such as CTE, Student Ambassador, middle school engagement opportunities. At this time, we will be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Start off with Mrs. Taussand.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. Thanks, guys, for bringing us this update. I think a lot of this information is really important. I want to ask a clarifying question because you saw my face when you said it. So are you telling me that we can have a student who passes an industry certification, but if they didn't take a coherent sequence of courses, which is basically 3 or more in a pathway, then the state does not recognize them as being industry, or give us credit for a student as being industry certified?
Yes, ma'am.
Why?
I can't answer the question of why. I think we can definitely pull up law and look at the verbiage for you. I think it's also important to note that the state only recognizes a certain number of industry certifications. The federal government recognizes additional certifications. To give you kind of a number estimate, there are 79 certifications currently recognized by the state of Texas for this school year and last school year. But on the Perkins grant, there are more than 400 certifications that we can report.
Well, I was just going to ask, so the state of Texas gets to decide what they deem appropriate for a student to be certified in, whether they have a job or not, and are considered by the industry to be certified.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, that doesn't sound good for kids. And I would like to know what the law is, because we're currently in session. And I think it's really important that we're past, maybe there's a bill out there somewhere that we should be supporting, and we don't know it yet. So I think it's important for us to know as a board so that we can get behind it if there is, because I don't think this supports student success. And who is the state of Texas to tell a student what they should or should not be interested in? I don't understand that. So thank you for that information. My other question, it's very frustrating. So my other question is, I was going to ask about, I saw we have numbers of students on the PSAT, SAT, and ACT, and we break it out, and dual credit, and we break it out by race, but we don't break it out by student like we did on the industry certifications. I'm interested in seeing how our special education students are doing, how our economically disadvantaged students are doing, and how our LEP students are doing on those college preparation, college pathway tests. Because part of having early college high school, as we're preparing, is to ensure that more students are able to go on to college if they desire. So I'm interested in seeing how we're doing in those other categories. Can we get that information?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can get that information. Yep.
Because I just want to, I think I say this every session, so I have, my oldest daughter is graduating. She has a disability, and we just had to remove the endorsement from her graduation plan because the state of Texas does not deem her eligible for an endorsement because she has an intellectual disability and can't pass their STAR test. So it's a point of frustration for me that we are giving these kinds of standardized tests that are not appropriate for children who have individualized plans, which is also the law. So the law is not consistent. So I want to see it because I want to make sure that just because the state of Texas says it's not possible or it's not important, that we don't say that as a district. Thank you, guys.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, Ms. Wadasek, on page 16, if you could go back to that. So, I'm sorry, yeah, no, it's the one with the, oh, they have a different one, sorry. It's the one with college and career opportunities earned in high school. There you go, that one. Okay, my 16. Okay, so is this saying that 4,995 certifications were earned by our students last year? So we had basically 5,000 kids.
Correct.
Okay.
And I would say this, that 5,000 students, that would be 5,000 certifications earned.
Okay, so it may not be 5,000 students.
May not be 5,000 students, and that I
Okay.
might earn 2 certifications in one class.
Got it. Do any of these certifications, or I should say, would any of these certifications allow a student to apply those and go right into industry after graduating high school?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do some of them still require that a student maybe continue with a 2-year program or something like that?
Some of them do require a 2-year program to go on. It depends on what level of entry. I'll use AutoCAD and Revit as a great example.
That is a great example.
Which is architecture and design opportunity for students. So we have students earning their Revit certification. We have several business partners that are looking to hire them immediately. And then we'll pay for them to go to college to continue to get additional training.
Yeah, those people are in short supply. So, okay. All right, I just wanted to make sure I understood what that number meant. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Do we have any other comments or questions? I just wanted to make a comment. It seems as if our dual credit enrollment, our dual credit classes, our industry certifications attempted, and our students who earned certifications by a student group had tremendous growth. Do we expect that type of growth going forward, or is that kind of a one-time kind of get serious and bring them up to level kind of a thing, or if that makes any sense?
I can answer about the industry certifications and the coherent sequences. I don't think that we will see the tremendous jump that you saw in 17 on a slide that looks at data. However, we do absolutely anticipate that trending up, and that is related to us continuing to train our teachers and provide them with support to be prepared to give new certifications to students.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time and the presentation. Next, we will be moving to 11A1, which is the zoning. We're moving down the agenda. Dr. Dupree?
Yes, Beth has a brief presentation, just a few slides to go over the boundary proposal.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dupree. Good evening, board members. As staff prepared the boundary proposal to balance enrollment between First Colony Middle School and Fort Settlement Middle School, we engaged with the campus principals, we engaged with central office staff, and a focus group that consisted of community members and 2 students. The goal as we planned the boundary proposal was to bring a proposal for board consideration that balances enrollment between Fort Settlement and First Colony for the long term through the 10-year planning horizon. and that aligns with the opening of future elementary school 53 for when that process begins with the community. I want to draw your attention to this map here, and you have a larger version at your seat. This shows you in pink the current Fort Settlement. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The pink area is Fort Settlement's zone, with the blue area being what is currently zoned to First Colony, inclusive of the area that we're proposing to rezone to First Colony in blue with yellow outline. I'll show you in greater detail this specific area in the coming slide, but first I want to point out to you that during this planning process, we analyzed other possibilities as well, such as moving the triangle that's above or on the other side of Highway 59 back to First Colony Middle School. We realized there were 74 middle school students in this area, so that would not be the impact that would better balance enrollment in this area. We analyzed other scenarios as well, and that included moving parts of the zone currently zoned to Colony Meadows Elementary back to over to First Colony Middle School. However, the scenarios that we looked at either didn't balance enrollment or didn't balance enrollment for the long term for the 10-year projection as was our goal. So in this slide, it drills down to greater detail of the area we're proposing to change, and it shows it in its current zone of Fort Settlement in pink, outlined dark, and you can see that this area starts from the intersection of LJ Parkway and University Boulevard, and then moves east past Riverstone Boulevard, straight south, encompassing the terrace at Riverstone to Oilfield, then east to Thompson Ferry, straight back to LJ Parkway, and north and west of LJ Parkway back up to University. In the 2019-20 school year, this area is projected to have approximately 340 students that will be in 6th through 8th grade next year. Those are our current 5th through 7th graders. Our implementation plan is aligned with Policy FC Local, which allows for rising 8th graders, our current 7th grade students, to request to remain through a transfer. However, district transportation would not be provided to those students who do request the transfer to stay. It's important to remember that this area, as you heard earlier, was moved to Sullivan from Settlers Way and to Sullivan from Commonwealth Elementary when Sullivan opened in 2016. In the near term, this proposal creates a feeder pattern split with Sullivan Elementary feeding 45% into Fort Settlement and 55% into First Colony until Elementary 53 opens, when Sullivan boundary would likely feed 100% into Fort Settlement and Elementary 53 would feed 100% into First Colony. As you can see in the bottom table, this proposal provides a long-term solution by maintaining Fort Settlement Middle School under 100% of its design capacity over the 10-year horizon. I want to also point out in the data tables, you might notice a discrepancy in some of the data with the numbers if you try to add 340 students to the new zone. And in the future years, or in 1920 specifically, it's because the way that you work with those projections is looking at live-in, and the current and the projected includes students who may be on a transfer, inclusive in the PASA data. And so when we looked at the zoning, we looked at those live-in students only. So there's a slight delta in some of those numbers, and that's how that is explained. When we have a new boundary, then we reconfigure those numbers with the actual live-in attendance in the new boundary. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Thank you very, very much, Mrs. Martinez. Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Beth. So, I just want to start out with a little intro. There's been a lot of talk out there, a lot of...
Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes.
I'm very sorry. This is an action item, and I need a motion first.
Oh, yes. Motion to approve as presented.
We have a motion by Mr. Rosenthal and a second by Mrs. Haliger. Do we have discussion? Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that.
So, as I was saying, there's been a lot of discussion out there. I believe that I'm someone who listens to both sides, and I'm also, if I've ever made a wrong decision, as I've said here before, never afraid to say that I was wrong. I'm honest. I'm open to meet with people I have done that. I have met with the Riverstone folks last year when they wanted us to build them a Riverstone Middle School. Recently, I met with PTO from Marshall High School. And we had a chance to sit down and they explained why they were upset with some comments that I had made. Ones that I actually made, not ones that were attributed to me. We talked, we came to an understanding, and I apologized to them. And I apologize again, because I see Ms. Vivian here. And so, as far as this rebalancing plan goes, this is the right thing to do. It's the right thing for students, and it's the right thing for our teachers. And last month, I brought up the fact that we have 33 kids in pre-AP classes, and as a teacher, that's a stressful situation. It's not just stressful for the kids, it's stressful for the teacher. Fort Settlement Middle School is overcrowded. The principal stated that in public meetings, and our superintendent stated that as well. This plan was discussed back in November of 2014. It's on video. Anyone can watch it. Anyone can see this is what we had planned for 4.5 years ago. This is not something that just came up. This was actually supposed to take place a little over a year ago when the boundaries for Thornton were drawn. I don't know what happened. It's water under the bridge now, and here we are. I could go through the reasoning again, why I believe Fort Settlement is overcrowded, but I've already done that. It's on video from last month. I'll keep it short. And so I am supporting this wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Mrs. Tolsan?
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. So, I have, like Mr. Rosenthal, have listened to community views and perspectives. Many of you in this room know me pretty well, regardless of what side you're on. For the last 4.5, almost 5 years, I've met with most of you. I've been in your homes. I've listened to your perspectives, your concerns, your complaints, your worries, and I've always been very, very open to doing that, and have supported almost everything, if not everything, up until this point. I'm very sensitive to the children, most of all. And anytime I make a decision sitting on this dais, that's always my number one concern. And anybody sitting up here can tell you that. Dr. Dupree and I talk a lot about what's going to happen to the children, how the children feel. So I don't know if everyone sitting out there knows this, but last year we were faced with a similar decision to make, rezoning middle schoolers. And everyone sitting up here voted to rezone those middle schoolers. And that included my child. My child, who is now a 7th grader, just like one of the speakers earlier tonight, she was a 6th grader, a rising 7th grader, and I voted with this board to rezone her. And I didn't ask for an exception to policy, and it wasn't the most fun thing to do as a mom, sitting up here as a board member, but I did it because it was overall the best thing to do for balancing enrollment for those children, for supporting the counselors who were overburdened and the teachers who were overburdened. So it wasn't the easiest decision to make as a parent. And I wasn't real happy about her having to move as a 7th grader. But I didn't go home and express my anger or my frustration to her, because as a parent, it was my job to do the best I could to help her transition. And now that we're more than halfway through her 7th grade year at a new school, I can tell you that she's okay. And she's okay because I'm okay. And because I helped her be okay. She was a legacy because she's the third of my 3 girls at the middle school. She was looking forward to being part of the choir program, just like someone said earlier. She had a lot of pride in her school, the school she was going to where her sisters went. All the fine arts teachers knew her, knew she was coming, and that's what she was looking forward to. But life is about things happening sometimes that we don't expect and sometimes don't even want. And it's about change. And so we supported her getting through this change. And so did all the other parents whose kids got rezoned. So I understand this probably better than anybody up here, and certainly like as some of you do. I understand it on a personal level. And so I have listened to both sides. I have spent many hours reviewing everything, going back and forth about who we should rezone and how, and which students should go and which ones wouldn't. And I personally don't see a reason to make an exception to policy here. And so the bottom line is I'm going to support the recommendation. I also want to say, most of you have probably seen the opinion article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago. And I want to address that really quickly because I want to make sure that everyone understands. Because most of you do know me, and I've been around here a while. I'm the mouth on the board. Maybe Addie and I compete for that a little bit. But, you know, I always speak up for what I believe in and what I think is right. I'll stand with any of you in this room, for your kids, for what I think is right. I have stood with a lot of you. And in 5 years, we've had a lot of community feedback and engagement. Some of it's been, respectful. Some of it hasn't been respectful. Some of it's been ugly. But I have never experienced quite the level that we have experienced this time around. And it was very disturbing. And that doesn't mean it was any of you who spoke here this evening. And I was very careful, so I thought, to say there was a small group of individuals. That was my experience. That was my personal experience. And I felt that it was important, not just as a board member who is experiencing this, and any board member up here can tell you that this is not the first time that we have experienced threats and intimidation at this level. I have been at community meetings where our police officers have had to step in, and other community members have spoken to me in the past about feeling threatened or intimidated. And that's just not right. It's just not right. So my intent was to call the behavior of adults what it is, and to call it out as being wrong. It's just wrong. Again, we meet with people, we engage with people, but this level of behavior I just felt like was over the line. If anyone felt like I was targeting you specifically, someone spoke earlier saying I'm new to this community. It's not you. It's not about you. But there are individuals, and I think we all have to admit it, who have crossed the line. And that was my point, is that we cannot tolerate that as a community. We are better than that. And so that was my point in doing that. Since then, I have received overwhelming support. I'll tell you, overwhelming support. And I think it's because community members have felt like this hasn't been handled the best way it could have been handled by some individual adults. And so I want to thank everybody for being here, regardless of where you stand on this issue, and for very respectfully sharing your views, because we do take it into consideration and we do appreciate it. And we really do, it does impact, at least I'll speak for myself, it impacts my decision when I hear you speak, you know, respectfully and not in a threatening way. The last thing I'll say is it is our purpose, I believe, to ensure that this is a long-term solution. I looked at it from that perspective. The Riverstone community asked us to find land within Riverstone for an elementary school, and that was the purpose of all of this. Otherwise, Riverstone, this area would have been rezoned months ago. We would have gone through this process months ago. The June email that was referred to earlier specifically stated that in tandem with the elementary school work, that attendance boundaries for First Colony and Fort Settlement would be redrawn. I'm looking at the email right here. I'm looking at it. And that was always the case. Nobody gets together in secret to do these things. That just doesn't happen. It was discussed in November of 2014. It was discussed during the facilities planning, which is all the community events that I attended, where I engaged a lot of Riverstone residents because it was discussed. It was sent out in June. It was sent out in November again. And so I don't believe it was secret. And the whole point of this was to try and find the land within Riverstone that was requested of us. And we've been diligently going about that process. And once land was located, which, by the way, we just can't buy outright, we're going to have to go through an eminent domain process that was voted on. And so we had to wait for all of that. And it was our desire to support, or to try and support, the community's wishes. And that is the only reason that we have waited until now, and it's separate. And so these boundaries will allow for long-term solutions, because once elementary school 53 is built, then this portion can go to that elementary school, and the rezoning into the middle school will be the same. It will not change. It will be the same. And I asked a lot of questions around that. So with that, I will pass the mic.
Thank you, Mrs. Tolsan. Mrs. Helliger? Please hold your applause. Thank you.
As the other mouthpiece, I guess. I do want to say a lot of the points that you had to say, Ms. Tolsan, I concur with what you stated. I also listen. I also have an earpiece as well, and took the opportunity to meet with several community members on both sides, you know, in order to make sure I'm making a good, sound decision tonight. And as of late, even as of Saturday, I met with a group of people to discuss their opposition to this plan. And so I had some questions because I didn't have all my information. I was running all day long. So I asked them to send me some information of what they were saying so that I can process it. And then I did. I called Dr. Dupree and I had a list of questions to make sure that I understood and got clarity on what was said to me, and make sure that I didn't misunderstand, or maybe even the information that was presented to me today, there was any kind of discrepancies. And after receiving the information from Dr. Dupree and his staff, it was clear to me that, you know, sometimes when we put together our own data, we don't have the background as maybe our staff does. Not to say that sometimes we don't have our own hiccups, but I appreciate you for even sharing the information about how the discrepancies within the data, because I sure was sitting here trying to add up the numbers and understand what goes into these numbers. And one of the questions I had was on that triangle, because what the information was provided to me was a little larger than what you've presented to me today. So, and that makes sense in how we balance. You know, we don't want to just put any group into this feeder pattern. We want to put the right area in that's going to have a long-term solution for the district. So I just really wanted to say that because, you know, people tend to think that we don't do our homework. We do our homework and ask tough questions, even on a Sunday. To make sure that, you know, we are prepared for this money. I mean, a lot of time is put into these discussions and into planning and making these decisions. And you all know that when we don't feel it's right, we'll say no. And we'll say, you know, can you all go back and provide other options or other choices, or put something on hold. And in this particular instance, I'm going to say that, you know, this is the right thing for us to do for long term. The district has been asking us, as members of the community, have been asking us to make sure that we make long-term decisions. As of last month, when with my talking points, I'll put it that way, with my talking points, you know, it's about, you know, making sure that we move forward with the decisions that we make and make sure that they're done correctly. And to me, this is done correctly, and it's put together for the betterment of our kids in our district. So thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Helliger. Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. I would simply like to say, like the rest of my trustee peers up here, I have listened to parents on both sides of this issue. I realize how important it is for each side and how emotional it is. And it's a difficult decision to make. But I have studied the information that's been presented, and I believe it's in the best long-term interest to accept the administration's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. James? Or no, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, if you're going to call on me.
I'm not to call yet.
It's fine. I would agree with many of the things my colleagues have said. This is a decision that we pondered in 2013, we pondered in 2014, we came back to it in the summer of 2018, we talked about it again in the fall, we brought it up last month. So I'm ready to make the decision. Thank you, staff, for your hard work to put it together for us.
Thank you, Mrs. James. I'll make a quick comment here, as my other fellow board members did. This job is hard, and I can also attest that we do the best we can for all students, and all of us sitting up here, we care. I also concur with all of my fellow board members in the comments they made this evening who spoke, which would be everybody. And now I'm going to call for the vote. Please vote. Motion passes. Next, we will consider our entire consent agenda, except item 12A3, which will be moving to our action item later in the evening.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented with the exception of item 12A3.
A3.
I second.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mrs. Helliger. Do we have discussion?
Yes.
Mrs. James.
Sorry, I just have one comment in that there's been a slight correction to one of the sets of minutes since they were posted on Thursday, Dr. Dupree? And that, you want to comment?
Yes, I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that before. The January 22nd minutes, we inserted one sentence just to clarify an item. It's been provided to the board in advance of the meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. Please vote. Motion passes. We will now convene in closed session under the Texas Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551, and those sections listed in the agenda, and for the purpose of private consultation with the board's attorney, as any or all subjects are authorized by law.